What's up everyone, I'm Eldridge, and today we're gonna look at Tatsuta, Japanese cruiser. So the Tatsuta is a light cruiser, very similar in a way to the Yubari, and I know what you're thinking, oh my god, not another Yubari. But the Tatsuta does what the Yubari does at tier 3. In stats, the Tatsuta is actually very similar to the Yubari. However, since it's tier 3, the most valid comparison is of course going to be another tier 3 cruiser, and that would be the St. Louis. The Tatsuta has 17,700 hit points, whereas the St. Louis has 29,500 hit points. The Tatsuta also only has up to 63 millimeters of armor, although on average it's more like 20 to 30 millimeters. It is slightly more armored than the Yubari, but not by much. The St. Louis, on the other hand, is on average at about 50 to 60 millimeters, with 76 millimeters being the highest amount of armor. So in total, the St. Louis definitely has more hit points and more armor. However, the Tatsuta makes up for this very much in speed and maneuverability. The Tatsuta has a top speed of 33 knots, whereas the St. Louis only has 22 knots. The Tatsuta, being 33% faster than the St. Louis, can use that speed to run away from the St. Louis, to catch up to the St. Louis, to run rings around the St. Louis, to use islands to its advantage, and just use and utilize that speed and maneuverability to dodge incoming fire and get closer to the St. Louis, where it can then use its firepower against it. The turning circle is deceptive. The St. Louis has 710 meters of a turning circle and the Tatsuta has 800. However, this is due to their speed. The St. Louis has a narrower turning circle because it moves so incredibly slowly. The Tatsuta, however, turns a lot faster just because it drives that 800 meter circle with a much higher speed. So the Tatsuta will complete its turn quicker than the St. Louis, however, be aware that it's going to need more space to do it. The rudder shift time is much better on the Tatsuta, and this is really the most important bit because it allows you to dodge incoming fire very effectively because you're able to switch from, going to the left to going to the right in a very quick fashion. And it allows you to shift your position in the water quickly enough so that incoming long-range shots are just going to be ineffective. When we come to concealment, the Tatsuta absolutely wins out over the St. Louis. 8.3 kilometers isn't much for a destroyer of tier 3 or tier 4, but it is pretty good and works well for the Tatsuta because it allows you to get almost into torpedo range against heavier ships that you might be facing off against, and then those last 2 to 3 kilometers that you have to get are going to be pretty easily achieved because as a cruiser you still do have enough armor to survive just long enough to get into the position where you can fire your torpedoes. Air detectability range is of course nothing special, but for a cruiser it's still pretty relevant, and it's much better than the St. Louis's detectability. Now in terms of guns, the Tatsuta has absolutely no chance whatsoever against the St. Louis. In a direct gunnery duel where both just put their DPM into each other, the Tatsuta dies long before it can do any significant amount of damage against the St. Louis. The St. Louis has 14 guns, and they are of higher caliber than the Tatsuta, so each shot does a little bit more damage, although not a whole lot. However, the Tatsuta's guns do win out slightly in range and rate of fire, so when you're able to put successive DPM into a St. Louis or other ship, then you will be able to do a significant amount of gunnery damage over time. It's of course nowhere near the St. Louis, but then again the St. Louis also has its disadvantages. And that brings us to the torpedoes. Now here, there's really no comparison because the St. Louis doesn't have torpedoes. The St. Louis is a pure gunboat, and that's really both its curse and its blessing. The Tatsuta has the option to go for both its guns and its torpedoes. There's always a choice in how you play and how you want to engage different ship types. There's a lot of variety to the gameplay because depending on the situation, you might want to just rush in and try to go for your torpedoes, or you might want to stay back and evade counterfire and try to do as much damage as you can with your artillery. To get down to it, the torpedoes have 58-second reload, a 7-kilometer range, move at 57 knots, and do 9,067 damage. Now, that damage is pretty low when it comes to torpedoes, especially for the Japanese. I mean, these are probably the weakest Japanese torpedoes you will ever see on any ship. However, the Tetsuta also has 2 sets of tubes with 3 tubes each, so it has 6 torpedoes. That, for Tier 3, is very significant. And apart from the American destroyers, there are currently no other ships at Tier 3, or Tier 4 for that matter, that have this many torpedoes. That is the real strength of the Tetsuta. It brings a lot of torpedoes that each have a chance to do critical damage, and then it is far more than enough to kill anything the Tetsuta could meet. In conclusion, the Tetsuta relies very much on its speed, maneuverability, stealth, and its torpedoes to do its work at Tier 3. And as you can see, that is very similar to how I described the Yubari. But if you look at the 2 strongest categories of the Yubari, apart from anti-aircraft, which are speed and concealment, you will see that it still is very much in favor of the Tetsuta. The Tetsuta is a very fast ship and a very stealthy ship, and it has about the same artillery firepower as the Yubari. Yes, its torpedoes do less damage, but it also has more of them, they reload quicker, the range is better. Now, I was very harsh on the Yubari, and while doing this review, I very much figured out that what really bothers me about the Yubari is that it sits at Tier 4. If the Yubari was a Tier 3 ship, I would be on the bandwagon with the other people and yell from the rooftops how amazing the Yubari is. I just don't think it's good enough at Tier 4, because it can meet the Cleveland, the Fuso, the Aoba. Those are very, very strong ships, and the Yubari just has absolutely no chance against these ships. However, at Tier 3, the Tetsuta doesn't have to worry about those Tier 6 ships. Sometimes, very rarely, the matchmaker will throw you into those games, but I have a suspicion that it's more to not that many players being in the queue than there actually being a 3-tier spread. So I do think the Tetsuta is a very strong ship at Tier 3. It does its job very well, and we'll see it in the gameplay. So this first game is actually from when I was still making experience with the Tetsuta. I did keep it after I unlocked the Kuma because I do enjoy playing the Tetsuta and I wanted to play more of it. Whenever I play the Tetsuta on this map in particular, I really like to go for the sea point. Because of the 2 big mountain islands right next to the point, it gives you a lot of cover from the enemy team, and you only have to deal with very few of them, pretty much only the ones that actually go for the sea point as well. It's also where a lot of destroyers go, and there he is, that's the man I wanted to meet. Also, because of that little bay in the eastern map border island, it gives you enough space with the Tetsuta to actually make a full turn without having to back up or anything. I open fire on the destroyer, and I'm already thinking about how to best turn, which is why I'm not making an entire turn. I'm being a bit easier on the throttle. And I release my torpedoes, keep firing at him a little bit, and luckily he turns right into one of my torpedoes. As you could see there with the torpedo spread, I like to fire one along the path that it advises me to fire them at, and then I fire one a little bit more toward the ship in case they turn into me or slow down. Then I have another set of torpedoes that is going to go pretty much directly on top of them. Because let's face it, turning into the ship that's firing at you and slowing down, that's pretty much the only things you can do about torpedoes. And so being a bit proactive with that, especially when fighting a destroyer, I mean, a destroyer doesn't have a lot of hit points, so, you know, might as well make the best out of your torpedoes. I keep looking to the left because of the smoke. A ship could appear at any point, and I really want to make sure I spot them early. There was a ship on the other side of the mountain that was sort of heading for the pass, but I am not entirely sure what his plans are, so I just head straight for the pass, just in case he comes through, I can head him off. I look again to the left, and looking back, oh, yep, there's the Phoenix. I fire some speculative shots, and then I just turn and give him a full nice broadside of my torpedoes. 1 and a 2. And that's all she wrote, because all 6 of those are going right on target. Delicious. Tasty, tasty Phoenix. I run aground, but yeah, you know. I mean, come on. I just killed a Phoenix with, 6 torpedoes, so, give me a break. First 2 kills on the enemy team go to me. And I decide to back up and then go north around the island, basically back the way I came, because I don't really think there's going to be a whole lot more ships heading for sea. The point is captured, and I want to head for the middle of the map. Now, I could, of course, just do a full circle and drive through the pass, but I always find that driving through that pass exposes you to a lot of fire, and so I prefer to take the long way around. I'm not gonna show you the entire way, because I pretty much drive around here for 2 minutes without really doing anything. After my little odyssey across half the map, I finally, I see the aircraft carrier that someone else has spotted, and I'm thinking about going for him, but it looks like 3 of my teammates are already heading that direction, so I decide to instead help with the enemies that have overrun the A point. I decide to stick to this island chain relatively closely so that if I have to, I can duck behind one of the islands in case the battleship starts focusing me. And then once I move into range, I open up on the battleship. Anytime. Anytime now? There we go. Sadly, I forgot to turn my gun turrets around prior, so they're not all ready. But now I'm ranged in and I have all my turrets pointing at them. Also, by the way, notice the St. Louis in front of me and how much faster I am than the St. Louis. That's what 11 knots will do. It doesn't look wholly impressive, but it is over the course of the game. And we're just letting this battleship have it. There's really not much this Congo can do. He's being pummeled by 3 cruisers. And he's been pretty much separated from all of his friends. I'm really at this point just waiting to get a little bit further into range, and then I'm just going to unleash my torpedoes on him, which will end his life. And there they go. And at that range, there's really not a whole lot he can do about it. I take some fire from his secondary batteries, but my torpedoes strike true and he dies. I see that we're about to win, so I'm just going to take some more potshots at this destroyer and maybe get in some extra damage. Keep missing a lot. But then I get a good salvo, I take him out, and that pretty much seals the game. And his torpedoes are just completely ineffective. And we win by objective. The second game, we're not going to look at it in its entirety, but rather just the first roughly 6 minutes of action. And the reason for that is I rather foolishly engaged in a little bit of a chat tussle with the enemy Miyogi, who was incessantly complaining about how overpowered torpedoes were. And after having played probably 4 or 5 games that day where people were complaining about that, I just couldn't take it anymore and just had to say something. And it just kind of escalated and, well, it just kind of ruined the game. I lost a lot of damage that I could have done while I was typing, and I could have had a much better game than I eventually did. It was still a 2000 experience game, but again, it could have been much better. However, I did want to show the first half of this game because it does highlight a few things that are really important with the Tatsuta. So this enemy Miyogi comes very aggressively forward around the island, and me and my friend in the cruiser both start opening up on him. There's also a destroyer in the game, and because he has already popped his smoke over here, we know that he's definitely on this flank. So we do have to watch out for him. The Miyogi is now entering the destroyer's smoke. And there's the destroyer, sneaking around behind the island. So in hindsight, I should have done something different here. I slowed down because I wanted the other cruiser to take the front so that I can support him, being the lower tier. But instead I probably should have veered into this pass between the islands. However, I don't, because right now I am taking fire from the battleship, and that makes me actually turn to the left. What I should have done instead is I should have actually gone into that pass and come out behind the battleship. Because like I am doing right now, I'm driving into a bay pocket, and I cannot get out of here anymore because I'm not going to be able to turn in time. I keep firing at the battleship, and I keep trying to turn, but it's completely foolish, and it's inevitable at this point. I'm going to collide with I'm going to beach myself because, well, the Tetsuta has a bad turning circle. And at this point I'm thinking, oh boy, he's just going to open up and I'm just going to die. I pump a few more shots into him and just back up, and then I notice he's not shooting. Oh, that's because his guns aren't actually pointing this way. Well, that's convenient. I take some fire from his secondary turrets, but I'm not that worried. He does fire at me, but it doesn't actually do that much damage. And I decide, alright, I'm just gonna go forward and kill this destroyer as he foolishly turns into me. And a 1. And that's all I need. And he died. Goodbye! In the meantime, the battleship has also been blown up by my buddies, and we're pretty much clear on this flank, which is very surprising. And there he goes in the chat complaining that torpedoes are overpowered. However, let's focus on this Phoenix. My cruiser buddy on this flank died, and so it's just me and this destroyer against the Phoenix. I land some okay shots on him, but I'm not doing a whole lot of damage. He just doesn't really seem to know what he wants to do yet. And I decide to go forward so I can go around the island and have some cover from him. Because the Phoenix does have more guns than the Tetsuta, and more armor and hit points. I need to be the one dodging his shots as much as I can. Fires on me, does some decent damage. Also, of course, important to notice that I only have 2,000 hit points left after this ordeal. I decide to fire some speculative torpedoes just in case he slows down or turns into this pass between the islands. And then I just fire some nice shots, which happen to go right into his citadel and bring him to about half hit points. Very, very nice barrage, that one. Again, I do some really nice damage. And at this point, I'm actually thinking that he might have slowed down or turned into my torpedoes, but all the torpedoes end up missing. But that's fine. I hug this island because I want to be in cover from him as long as possible. And then as soon as he comes around the corner, I open up on him again. And he misses most of his shots. He hits me once, but it's not enough to kill me. And my next salvo takes him out. So as you can see, while the Tetsuta has very little armor and is a very fragile ship, it does have the ability to get really close to the enemy. And when it unleashes its torpedoes, the damage is still good enough to take out most of the ships that it meets. And the Tetsuta isn't a perfect ship. There are definitely weaknesses about it. The guns aren't amazing, but as you saw in the video, if you aim right, you can still deal a lot of damage at those tiers. Because at the tiers that the Tetsuta plays, tier 3 to 5, the opposing ships aren't going to be that strong either, because most ships at those tiers have flaws in some way. And as such, the Tetsuta does really keep up with the other tier 3 ships. Basically, everything the Yubari is at tier 4, the Tetsuta is at tier 3. All in all, the Tetsuta is a great ship, and it's a brilliant entrance into the Japanese cruiser line, because it does teach you a lot of the skills that you are going to need with the Japanese cruisers. If you enjoyed this ship review, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, because I will definitely be making more videos. Next I'm going to review the Kuma, the tier 4 Japanese cruiser. If there are any other ships that you would like me to review, or if you have any criticism or feedback about my videos in general, then please leave them down in the comments. I do love reading them, and it really helps me because I want to get better at this, and the only way to improve is to listen to feedback and criticism. But until then, I've been Eldritch Master Donkey, and I'll see you in another video.